hope you rot.
See you there.
No, hey.
Go back to Tennessee too. We don't want you here. All your race bait. You ain't gonna be mayor either. The whole city, dog. George Floyd.
Are you ready?
George Floyd.
Fuck you.
I should have killed you.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for TereseAnn's death. All you had to do is let me see my kid. Now you're never gonna see her again.
I just want to say that I stick by the truth, which is that I did react in self-defense. I did love Marcel, and basically at trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies, and I do plan to appeal it. And that's all I have to say.
It's hard to imagine being such a cold-hearted killer that you not only don't care about the life that you snuffed out, but you also don't care about the innocent victims affected by your actions. Each murder can have a domino effect, destroying not only the life that was snuffed out, but everyone who knew and loved them. But the most heartless of killers not only don't care about the pain they cause, but they actually enjoy it. This is the story of some of the most evil killers who had the nerve to mock their victims' families when they saw them in court.
Two people died. A third was hurt, but survived.
There was help that was needed, and I tried to help.
Headlines about white supremacy and mass violence shoved a grieving city into a global spotlight.
Jeremy Christian is a white supremacist who in May 2016 attacked 2 men and injured a third person after he went on a racist rant while on a Max light rail in Portland, Oregon. Jeremy was screaming out anti-Muslim slurs and other offensive language directed at people of many different backgrounds and ethnicities. Among the many different things that he was screaming, Jeremy also claimed that as a taxpayer, he had First Amendment rights and that he could say whatever he wanted regardless of who it may offend. Jeremy's hate speech did end up offending people who were riding on the train, which at the time was quite crowded with passengers. The operator of the train heard that there was a disturbance going on and called for Jeremy to get off, but Jeremy refused and continued on with his offensive rant that targeted everyone around, from an underage Muslim girl wearing a hijab to a teenage black girl. He screamed at the teenagers who had not done anything to bother him and told them that they should leave America and go back to their home country. He yelled other incredibly offensive things at them as well, even telling them that they should end their own lives. The 2 teenage girls became very afraid and moved to the back of the train in an attempt to get away from Jeremy. Meanwhile, 2 young men named TereseAnn Miradin Namakai Meshe and Mika David Cole Fletcher came forward to try and stand up for the girls and calm Jeremy down. The young men stood in front of the girls, blocking Jeremy from them. They then firmly asked him to get off the train. When Jeremy didn't want to do so, Micah reportedly gave him a push, which infuriated him. It was then that Jeremy began to attack, using a sharp weapon, which he used to kill both TereseAnn and a 52-year-old Army veteran named Ricky Best, who happened to be nearby. He also attacked Micah, who managed to survive. The graphic attack, which was captured through cell phone footage, shows the events leading up to the violence, including Micah and Jeremy getting in each other's faces. These horrible murders occurred in no less than 12 seconds, terrifying and creating chaos among the rest of the passengers. According to witnesses, what followed was like a sort of stampede as the passengers began fighting their way off of the train at once. Jeremy blended in with all of the people and managed to flee the scene. While Jeremy made his way into a nearby neighborhood, some passengers chased after him, while others called 911 to report what had happened. Meanwhile, some medical professionals remained on the train to try and save Ricky and TereseAnn. Ricky ended up passing away while he was still on the train, while TereseAnn died of his injuries later at the hospital. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they were able to locate Jeremy. He still had the murder weapon on him at the time, and he was arrested with the help of around 8 officers. Jeremy reportedly showed no remorse for what he had done, and he said that it was because of his actions that he would be able to die in prison a happy man. In response to the men who died, he also said, "That is what liberalism terrorism gets you. Listen to some more of Jeremy's bizarre rant that he went on following his arrest.
On real, we talk that in force. This is what Patriot. We don't take tax. So,
Jeremy ended up getting charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. He faced other charges as well, including multiple counts of assault, intimidation, and unlawful use of a weapon. His arraignment was on May 30th, 2017. From even the very beginning of legal proceedings, Jeremy made it clear that he wasn't going to sit down and stay quiet. From the moment that he entered the courtroom, he reportedly began shouting out a variety of political phrases like "death to Antifa," "leave our country if you don't like our freedom," and even "you call it terrorism, I call it patriotism." During the trial, the jury heard from other witnesses who had been on the train that tragic day, including those who had tried to step in and defuse the situation.
I changed my my space where I was in the train to try and, I guess shield them from him, and maybe take some of whatever he was dishing out and just kind of get him to kind of focus on me.
In court, the jury also heard about some of the things that Jeremy had been up to before the attack. He was known to go on racially fueled rants while in public and was definitely not afraid of offending people. Check out this clip taken of Jeremy at an outdoor protest about 1 month before the train incident occurred. He is wearing an American flag wrapped around his shoulders and has a chain around his neck.
Take your mask off and debate! That's why I'm here. This is my soapbox. Portland, Oregon, the Northwest. We got Supreme Court rulings for our freedom of speech since the 50s and 60s in the Northwest.
Prior to the attack, Jeremy was already starting to display some unhinged behavior. His longtime neighbors said that the conversations were very odd when he did talk to them. In fact, one of the last conversations they had together was about the topic of alien life.
Revolution, you're not revolutionary, you got your face covered.
Christian, according to the evaluation, had become obsessed with the right to free speech.
This was also not Jeremy's first run-in with the law.
His name is Jeremy Christian, and this is the mugshot police sent out the morning after the attack. At that time, the Portland native was 35 years old, had already served time in prison for robbery.
Jeremy had already been convicted of kidnapping someone and robbing a convenience store back in 2002. During that incident, he handcuffed the attendant to a pole, wielding a weapon and wearing a ski mask. He was sentenced to 90 years behind bars for that offense. But this deranged man's life of crime did not end there. He was also later arrested for theft and for possessing a weapon despite being a felon.
I blame the system for creating and facilitating people like Jeremy. And then we, the community, have to deal with them. In my case, the white supremacists got special treatment from the police.
It was very clear from his past crimes that Jeremy was a very sick individual who probably never should have been let out of prison in the first place. If he hadn't been, maybe this whole attack would have never happened and the 2 victims would still be alive. Jeremy's trial for the attack finally began in late January 2020. It became clear from the beginning it was going to be a wild ride.
Death to the enemies of America. Leave this country if you hate our freedom.
Tonight, the men accused of the horrific rampage on a Portland train, 35-year-old Jeremy Christian, made a belligerent first appearance in court.
Outside of the courtroom, Micah expressed to the reporters his gratitude for being able to survive Jeremy's attack. But he also acknowledged the fact that the other victims did not get the same outcome he did.
I feel very lucky. I wish I wasn't the only lucky one right now.
He became emotional while talking about the type of human beings these Good Samaritans were.
2 men who worked very hard to build lives, create connections, to have love, lost their lives. And there's nothing more special than that.
Destiny Magnum, one of the 2 girls who was targeted by Jeremy on the train that day, also spoke out to share her story.
He told us to go back to Saudi Arabia.
This is a lengthy and very dramatic trial that involved 40 different witnesses to come forward and testify against Jeremy. When the case was finally handed over to the jury in February 2020, they deliberated over 2 days before finally reaching a verdict. Watch the dramatic moment as the verdict was read aloud in court.
We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled cause, do find our verdict upon the count submitted to us as follows. On count 1, the verdict is guilty. That's murder in the first degree.
For once, Jeremy remained quiet as he listened to the verdict. The jury had found him guilty of all counts. Jeremy's sentencing was held on June 24th, 2020. He appeared much different at the time than he had in earlier proceedings. His long hair was partially cut off with only random spots remaining, but his typical angry attitude was the same. This was his statement before the sentencing took place. He talked about his upbringing and tried to suggest that what he did on the train that day was self-defense.
I was brought up in Portland, Oregon. I went to the blackest high school in Oregon. Where I'm from, we defend ourselves. Where I was brought up, in North Portland, we defend ourselves.
It was clear that Jeremy was not remorseful about what he did and the lives he ruined. He even went so far as to say that it was the fault of those he victimized that families have been destroyed.
I chose violence. People died. You survived. I understand your feelings of guilt. You should apologize to the family. Not for not being there, but for being the main contributor of their death.
The other female victim whom he targeted on the train, Walia Muhammad, was given the chance to address Jeremy, and she did not hold back her hatred for him. While she was reaching the end of her address, he flew into a fit of rage, ripped off his face mask so violently that it ripped, and began cussing her out. He told her she was a liar and even threatened to harm her.
See you there.
No, hey.
Go back to Tennessee too. We don't want you here. All your race things. You ain't gonna be there either. I should have killed you.
Jeremy continued to scream as he was quickly escorted out of the courtroom by a group of officers. He was later sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. Randall Moore has very little respect for human life. On November 11th, 2009, he took the life of his wife, TereseAnn Moore, in Des Moines, Iowa. Therese, who had a young child with Randall, had previously filed a protective order against him because he had been violent in the past. But on that tragic day in 2009, Randall went to the apartment that he had once shared with TereseAnn and violently took her life. A law enforcement officer named Todd Rowland heard TereseAnn screaming for help and ran to assist her. But when Todd arrived at the scene, Randall fired at him, seriously wounding him. Todd managed to survive his injuries.
A short time later, Moore surrenders. Inside, police say his estranged wife's dead body is laying on the floor.
He told me he killed her.
Did he tell you why he killed her?
He said that he was upset because she wouldn't allow him to see his kids.
Randall was charged with murder, attempted murder, and first-degree kidnapping. Mary Whitman, a witness, shared her experience in court.
It was a horrifying thing to see, not knowing what was going to happen. I know I was very scared.
Officer Todd Rowland discussed the serious and very disturbing injuries he suffered.
My hand was mangled to the point where I could not grip my weapon. I tried, and I just, it wouldn't work. And it was like something you see in a movie, and it was just kind of surreal, and it was a mess.
While in court, the jury listened to the chilling 911 call from that tragic day.
You want me to tell you something?
Well, you can tell me whatever you want.
I didn't want to do any of this.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, all I wanted was my son. I just wanted to see my 7-month-old baby. That's all I cared about.
Randall was found guilty. In court, TereseAnn's grieving mother was able to give a statement about her daughter, but she was interrupted by Randall's cruel outburst.
The journal she wrote, she hated you. She hated you. You're a loser.
But perhaps the most shocking part of Randall's trial is this moment in which he showed how truly evil he was while addressing his victims' loved ones.
And I'll tell you point blank, I have not 1 ounce of remorse for TereseAnn's death. All you had to do is let me see my kid. Now you're never going to see her again.
At the end of the day, it was the judge presiding over the case who had the last word.
If anybody didn't know what a piece of work you were before you start talking, they know it now. I've never ever seen anybody like you. I hope, really, I never ever see anybody like you again.
Finally, the judge declared Randall's fate.
The court doesn't allow me to punish you any more than I'm doing now. If I could, I would.
Randall Moore was sentenced to 3 life sentences for the crimes against TereseAnn Lynch and an additional 25 years for the attempted murder of a police officer.
Now Randall is exactly where he belongs, locked up in the Anamasa State Penitentiary. He will live out the rest of his life behind bars. Do you think that justice was served for TereseAnn and Todd Rowland? Or do you think that Randall should have been forced to give his life for his horrific crimes? Let us know in the comments. Kamya Gamet is an extremely cruel and evil person. On May 18, 2013, she brutally took the life of her boyfriend, 38-year-old Marcel Hill. She later tried to say that she had just been defending herself.
According to the evidence presented at trial, Gamet used a frying pan, a floor lamp, and a large knife, which she used to stab Hill 12 times. Gamet claimed self-defense, saying she believed Hill was an intruder.
Kamya was arrested and charged with Marcel's murder on the same day. When presented with all of the details surrounding how Kamya brutally killed Marcel, the jury did not buy her story about self-defense. Instead, they concluded that the murder had been intentional and convicted her. It didn't matter to Kamya that she had been found guilty. She continued to stand by her story to the very end. At her sentencing, she was given the opportunity to make a statement. She could have used this opportunity to express remorse or even apologize to her victim's family. Maybe this could have caused the judge to feel some sort of pity for her, but Kamya chose to do none of these things. Instead, she said this.
I just want to say that I stick by the truth, which is that I did react in self-defense. I did love Marcel, and basically at trial, the way I was portrayed, mostly everything was lies. There was a little bit of truth, but mostly I was convicted off of lies, and I do plan to appeal it. And that's all I have to say.
The judge presiding over the case, John McBain, was clearly annoyed by her statement and tried to give her a second chance to say something more of value. But still, Kamya chose to be rude and disrespectful.
Do you want to tell the court about the 12 stab wounds that you did in self-defense?
The alleged 12 wounds?
No, I don't think the pathologist lied about those.
No, I don't have anything further to say.
Prior to the sentencing, Marcel's grieving aunt had the opportunity to say some words on his behalf. She spoke about the hole that Kamya left behind by taking Marcel's life.
You did leave a big hole in our hearts and a void that would never be filled. You took the life of our sister's only child. You took a bloodline out of our family. And we hope that each and every day that you remember the cries of help that he screamed.
As Diana read her statement, Kamya could not have been more disrespectful. At times, she was seen rolling her eyes, smirking, and even laughing. It was clear that nothing Diana was saying was having any effect on her. But just wait to hear what Kamya had to say when Diana reached the end of her statement.
The defendant appeared to be unmoved by anything Miss Banks had to say.
So we, the family of Marcel, would like to thank God for the special gift that you will receive today from the judge.
Is that it?
When I finish, I'll let you know.
Oh, okay. Serious?
Kamya's disrespect enraged Judge McBain so much that he threatened her with what he was going to do if she spoke out of turn again.
Just talk again. I'll have my court officer put a piece of duct tape in your mouth. You understand it? Try it one more time and see what happens to your mouth. You got something else to say?
Judge McBain then actually paused the court proceedings to request that duct tape be brought into the courtroom to silence Kamya. While it didn't end up actually being used, many in the courtroom likely hoped that it would be.
You know what? She's got a right to talk to the court after you murdered a relative of hers. And you're going to shut your mouth or I'm going to have some duct tape put on it.
Well, you talk to me.
This was enough to put the already very angry judge over the edge. He had quite enough of Kamya's heartless behavior and blatant disrespect for the family members of the man she so brutally killed.
Was caught on tape an extraordinary courtroom outburst.
Not from the defendant or from the victim's family, but from the judge himself, outraged by a convicted killer's actions in the courtroom.
Judge McBain had the final word.
I agree with the family. I hope you die in prison as well.
Kamya was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Keith Allen Ferguson, a 40-year-old man from Kalkaska County, Michigan, took the lives of 2 people in November 2014. The victims were 42-year-old Tiffany Ferguson and 63-year-old James Weber. Tiffany and Keith had 4 young children together. Tragically, he killed her in front of them. In fact, it was the children who ran from the home to tell a neighbor that their father had fired at their mother. Law enforcement was then called immediately. But before they arrived, Keith went to the home of James Weber, Tiffany's father, and held him hostage for hours before eventually taking his life. He was then arrested and charged with both first and second-degree murder. He pleaded guilty. It's not very clear why Keith committed these crimes aside from the fact that he was sick. Keith and Tiffany were separated at the time of the murders. The murders shocked the community.
Keith Ferguson admitted to killing his estranged wife, Tiffany Ferguson, and father-in-law, James Weber, in Kalkaska County Court on Tuesday morning.
Keith became enraged in court when the judge asked him questions about the killings. He then began to yell and call the judge names.
Okay, well, I'm not getting into the detail of what happened.
If you want to be guilty, you have to say what you did.
I'm not saying, all right, because of the respect and the safety of my children.
Things only continued to escalate.
I'm not saying nothing because they're going to see this. They don't need to hear that. Understand what I'm saying? You know, let's just make this painless and not give me my 100 years or whatever.
Anyone present could see the irony in the fact that Keith seemed to be so intent on saving his children from future pain, but he had made the conscious decision to take the lives of both their mother and grandfather. This was probably the most hurtful thing he could have done to his own family. When Keith was escorted out of the courtroom for a break, he also lashed out at a guard for attempting to touch him. But when he came back, Keith was more willing to talk about what had happened.
And did you intend to kill him?
Oh yeah.
And did you think about whether or not you wanted to kill him and make a deliberate choice to do so?
Oh yeah. Look at Apple Magazine.
Keith asked the judge that he be given the ultimate sentence, but the judge rejected his request, earning more obscenities from the killer right before he was led away. He never did show any remorse for his actions. During his sentencing, he was incredibly disrespectful to the court and to the family members of his victims. He again yelled obscenities and even flipped off the judge. He also refused to cooperate with the courtroom proceedings, angering the judge.
Okay, all right. Okay, stop.
At the sentencing, Tiffany's mother tearfully addressed Keith, reminding him of his children.
I can't imagine how Emma, Madeline, Nolan, and little Caroline must feel. They have no parents. What a cruel thing you have done to them. Your Honor, on behalf of the kids, myself, and all of Chip's friends and family, please send Keith to prison for life without any chance for parole.
And the judge agreed.
You may not meet the clinical definition of insanity, but there's clearly something fundamentally wrong. But you're incapable of understanding.
Keith was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. This is what Tiffany's mother had to say after the sentencing was over.
I really wanted him to understand the hurt that was and the children and
the prosecution was pleased with the outcome of the case.
I think that we, society, has got what we needed out of it, and I have had multiple discussions with the family, and this is what they were looking for as well.
This is the tragic story of Ronnie O'Neal, who on March 18, 2018 took the lives of 2 people and badly injured a third. The victims were Kenyatta Barron, his ex-girlfriend, and their 9-year-old daughter, Ron O'Neal. Their son, Ronnie IV, was able to escape and run for help. Meanwhile, Ronnie set the family home on fire. Ronnie chose to represent himself in court. Tragically, this meant that his underage son not only had to testify about what happened, but talk to him in court.
What happened next? What did he do?
My dad said, come here, come kill me with the beaver.
Listen as the child is forced to remember the horrific details of the day his mom and sister were killed in front of him.
Was there a time when your mother was able to get out of the closet?
She was like stumbling outside, and then I just saw my dad chase me.
What do you remember happening next?
My dad told me to walk around and say, like, some words.
The words he told him to say were Allah Akbar. Watch as Ronnie casually addressed his son in court, acting as if he hadn't tried to take his life.
How you doing, Ronnie?
Good.
It's good to see you, man.
Ronnie asked his son if he hurt them the night of the incident, to which the child replied, yes. He then asked him in what specific way he hurt him. Ronnie IV then recalled how he had used a knife to try to take his life.
Again, that was the first time that father and son have seen each other since that violent night back in March 2018. The boy's father, what you kind of heard there was him trying to call into question his son's recollection of the events of that night.
Ronnie's efforts did not work, and he was ultimately sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences plus 90 years. He received no possibility of parole. At his sentencing, when the victim's mother got a chance to speak, Ronnie remained incredibly disrespectful. At times, he was even seen smiling and smirking. Kenyatta's mother had hoped that Ronnie would have to pay with his life for his horrific crimes.
I'm not pleased with what the verdict was, and I wish you could overturn it and give him what he's rightfully due.
When all was said and done, Ronnie had his opportunity to speak, and he expressed no remorse.
I am not sorry for something I did do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
He then began yelling until the judge told him that if he didn't quiet down, he would have to leave the courtroom. She would later say that this was one of the most horrific cases she ever had to preside over. These are clearly some of the most evil people to ever walk the earth. Thanks to the justice system, they will live out the rest of their days on this planet, locked up behind bars, where they will never be able to harm the innocent ever again. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future videos.